Hi, I'm Joe Polizzi, and this is the Content Inc. podcast. 5 minutes every Monday for content creators who desire to be content entrepreneurs. Hello again, everyone. I'm super excited to release our third Content Inc. book tour interview. This means for the next 9 weeks, I'll be dropping a special Content Inc. episode on Thursday mornings. The book tour ran all through the month of May, mostly on the social audio app Clubhouse. This interview is with Wally Koval, founder of Accidentally Wes Anderson, and also a very large case study in the Content Inc. book. Wally and I actually worked with each other at Content Marketing Institute, and I remember when he started this Instagram account as just a simple way to track where he and his wife wanted to go on vacation. 1.5 million followers and a best-selling New York Times book later, and here we are. So here's the interview, lightly edited, and then I'll close it out at the end. Most of this is Wally and I chatting, but Ann Ginn, editor at The Tilt, leads up the Q&A part toward the end. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to the room. My name is Joe Polizzi. I'm the founder of The Tilt, a newsletter for content creators and content entrepreneurs, and author of Content Inc., which is why you're here. We're on the Content Inc. book tour, the business model for content creators. We're going to release the book in a couple weeks. And I am so excited to have my old friend Wally Koval from Accidentally Wes Anderson as our key guest today. Wally, of course, is a case study in the Content Inc. book, and he's going to talk all about how he took AWA from a small Instagram channel to a best-selling New York Times book and much, much more. I'd also like to welcome Ann Ginn and Laura Kozak from The Tilt. They'll be assisting me with today's room. And a big thanks to Ed Nussbaum for adding the Content Inc. book tour to the amazing Startup Club on Clubhouse. So thank you, Ed, for that.
Yeah, and Joe, just wanted to stop by and say congrats on the pending launch. Thanks for let us help out with Startup Club, and welcome everyone. And with that, I'm going to hop down the audience, but just want to say hello.
All right. Thank you, Ed. Really appreciate it. This is great. So here's how we're going to run it. I'm going to do about 30 minutes of questions with Wally. So get your questions ready. So after the 30 minutes, Ann's going to work with us on making sure that you all come up to the stage. If you have your questions, we'll get to as many of them as possible. So just go ahead and raise your hand whenever you're ready. And then one last point, if you would, please share this out on Twitter so we can have an amazing audience for Wally today, because it's his first Clubhouse event ever. So we want to make sure we get as many people to listen to Wally as possible. But you can also go to the bottom page and hit the plus sign and then invite some of your friends below. And by the way, this is being recorded, so just FYI if you ask questions. So let's get started today. I have known Mr. Wally Koval for, I think, almost 10 years now, and his career path is very, very impressive. Wally founded the @Accidentally Wes Anderson community on Instagram in 2017, and it has grown to more than 1 million adventures. Wally curates and publishes daily content with the help of his wife Amanda and their dog, of course, Dexter, in Brooklyn, New York. Wally, first, welcome to the room. So many things we want to talk about here, but I'd first like to focus on sort of the origin story behind the AWA Instagram page. Can you give us sort of the 3-minute story of how you got to the point of starting Accidentally Wes Anderson, and then take us up to maybe, I know it's quick, but up to your New York Times best-selling book?
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, first off, again, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here and pumped to be chatting with you guys and sharing this story. Yeah, I mean, AWA started on a whim. It started as a side project, and I think back to when it started back in summer of 2017, and I had just kind of, I don't know, Amanda and I, partner in crime in all things AWA and life. We had been doing some traveling, and I don't know if it was, maybe watching one too many Wes Anderson movies on a plane, hopping off a little jet lagged, a little hazy, and maybe the sun's hitting a building just right, or I'm not sure what, but starting to see locations pop up that seem like they could have been from a Wes Anderson film. And it started popping up all over the web and Reddit and all over the place. And, but these were just places. And I kind of tasked myself with a project, I guess. And I said, I'm going to learn a little bit more about these places. I want to know where they are. I want to know what they're about. And so I started just saying to myself, once a day, every day, you're just going to find one interesting photo, do some research on it, and see what you can come up with to start to kind of pull together an ad hoc travel bucket list for you and for me and Amanda for the next time we, have a couple weeks off and can go somewhere fun. And it expanded pretty slowly at the very beginning, but it was a conversation with, 20, 30 people from the very beginning who oddly, I still talk to regularly. Making quote unquote internet friends is a very odd thing, but an awesome thing nonetheless. And just talking about these places that we were posting, sharing stories about them, uncovering interesting factoids and interesting things that I had no idea. And it was just genuinely fascinating stuff, talking to people and learning about places all around the world. I don't know when the shift was, but, I continued with posting once a day and started diving further into stories about these places, kind of behind the facade and figuring out more about them. And there was an article that came up that somebody asked if they wanted to do an interview with us on a Vogue article. And when that popped off, it kind of jumped. The following expanded pretty significantly, but luckily the conversation kind of stayed the same. With an influx of new people, there's always kind of a worry of what direction is this going to go? Is it going to be fleeting? Are they going to stick around for the real conversation, or is it just kind of, oh, this is nice? And around that time, we started taking the community along on our own adventures. So, it was a bit selfish at first. Amanda and I were going to Buenos Aires and Uruguay. And I said, we've got 30,000 people here that are all over the world that we can probably tap them and ask them, where have they been? What, have they been to BA before? Do they have any interesting tips? And the outpouring of interest was significant. And it turned into this, once we touched down, we started sharing our adventure somewhat live. It was almost a choose your own adventure of where we should go next and taking tips from the community. And it was amazing. And that continued to go on and on with every adventure that we went on. Around that same time, I reached out to a friend and I said, these photos that we have coming in, and, there were submissions coming in, and we had created a website, very, very rudimentary website just to accept the submissions at that time. And I said, these photos are just beautiful and they deserve to be kind of preserved in a really beautiful way. He worked in publishing, and I said, how do you make a book? And I had no intention of, I just was curious about how we would do it. He put me in touch with a couple friends who ultimately, one would become an agent, and a great friend who would kind of take us down this path. We did a lot of research, and ultimately, I hand wrote probably 35 different letters to Wes Anderson before picking the right one to send, and, crossed my fingers that there wouldn't be a cease and desist on the other end of that letter. But instead, he was very interested in the project, gave his blessing. And from there, we started working with the community to cull these stories down. We started with about 15,000 photos from the submission process from the community. And we culled down those photos to about 1,000, and then started doing research. And we started figuring out what are the most interesting stories to go with these amazing photos. And ultimately, we came up with 200 locations, touching on every single continent, including Antarctica. And we had worked with 180 photographers from literally all over the world to pull this book together, did significant amount of research. And Wes Anderson never said he would be involved beyond allowing us to do it. But we were beyond blown away when we sent him the final product, and, he had final creative sign off on it. And instead of just saying, yes, you're good to go, he opted to pen a few words for us. And ultimately, it was just, the biggest, not just a cherry on top, but an incredible stamp of approval for the community, for what we had created up to that point. And the book blew us out of the water with the reception. There was, it was a very odd time. This was October 2020, and that was a scary time for a lot of different reasons. Not necessarily a time, if you look at it at face value, when you want to be releasing a quote unquote travel based book. But ultimately, we found that the community was empowered by this. It allowed them an opportunity to transport themselves, to escape for a moment, and just to kind of be positive in a time that was not super positive. And through that and through what we had created with the community, we were super honored to be, to see it go so well and ultimately end up on the New York Times bestselling list. And I still don't believe that I still don't believe that it hit that, but it did. Well, and here we are today.
Yeah, congratulations. The book, by the way, Accidentally Wes Anderson, the book, everyone should pick up. It is a beautiful book, not only informative from all the travel destinations you talk about, Wally, but I mean, it has got to be the nicest coffee table book I've ever seen. So absolutely go pick it up if you can. Okay, so we got from start to the bestseller. I know you've got other plans. We're going to get to that later, but I want to break down sort of how you built this audience on Instagram. You have over 1 million now, correct? I'm following you on Instagram?
Yes, it's around 1.4, 1.5.
Which for a little bit more than 3 years is pretty amazing. So what I want to first talk about your choice of audience. And I know you did this as a personal endeavor, but you have a specific audience that I think you're targeting for this. Like, who's that audience, and how did you really find that was your audience and sort of exploit that to find more of those types of people?
Yeah, we did not set out. I'll preface this by saying I did not necessarily set out to find the audience. I ultimately, looking back, without considering it, I had found a niche where that audience existed, or something that had not, I go way back, pre 10 years ago, Joe, when I was just trying, figure out what your niche is, and I feel like I spent so much time considering what that was, and ultimately never really came to it until I just started doing something that was interesting to me and didn't think about it all that much. There's a lot that goes into it. And once we were able to figure out who that audience was, we obviously were able to maximize the exposure to that specific audience. The beauty of the audience that we ultimately found ourselves surrounded by, this community. We always say community, and it truly is. And I think that's one of the reasons why it has grown so significantly, is because we talk to everybody like normal people. We're normal people. We're a small company. We do this just for them. But the community itself is made up of, we say, adventurers. An adventurer is someone who is interested in all types of things. It's somebody who wants a little bit of context. It's somebody who is curious about whether it's architecturally speaking, whether it's historically, whether it's just an interesting human interest story. We've found ourselves surrounded by this community of people who are interested in all of those things. And it kind of culminates in the window with which you come through, which is this aesthetic, right? We say that everything that's AWA, Accidentally Wes Anderson, is at the intersection of distinctive design and unexpected narrative. So without one, you don't have the other. You could have one without the other, but for our purposes, that's what we aim for. It's not just a pretty picture. We try to tell the story behind that. So we've found ourselves, again, we continue to unravel more aspects and more members of the community than we expected to ever have before. We thought it'd be others just like us, and that would be kind of the single silo of people who say, yeah, I didn't know that place existed in Croatia, and when I have the ability to go there, I'd love to check it out for these reasons. But now we find ourselves also in the company of historians, architects, and even interior designers who are utilizing the things that we're putting together, the book and the feed, as part of their design mood boards. So we're continually evolving as we uncover more aspects about the audience that we're serving. And I think evolution, as far as where we started in 2017 and where we've ended up today, evolving through listening to that audience has been a major key in that. I also don't know if I answered your question at all.
No,
So
that's that's you and I have talked about this so much, but no, I think it's perfect. I think people get the idea of the niche aspect of to it. Take us through some of the blocking and tackling. First of all, if you're on your phones, obviously you are. If you want to go to Instagram and check out the Accidentally Wes Anderson page, you'll see the type of imagery we're talking about if you haven't gone to it. Take us through. You had 1,000, 1,500 followers. Obviously, the interview or was it the Vogue article?
Yeah.
That you had.
Yep.
That blew up on you. But what was the blocking and tackling? What are the things that you did specifically on Instagram that helped you build audience and really take it to the next level?
Yeah, from the beginning, consistency was key, and that was consistency to the tone of voice that we had, and it was not something again that I planned. We built this machine as we built this car as we were flying down the road, and we continue to do that today. From the very beginning, it was consistency. This was a challenge to myself. Okay, Wally, once a day, every day, you're just going to find a place. It's something that you're holding yourself to, and you're going to go with it. And so once a day, every day for the past almost 4 years now, sometimes twice a day, we have posted online between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. Eastern. And that's just me holding myself to the one thing that I said I was going to do. As far as consistency, what we did to continue to attract an audience was remain true and consistent to the tone of voice. I'm not an expert. I had never claimed to be. And from the beginning, I'm here writing stories, history reports, and, people were saying, that's not right. This isn't right. Yeah, totally. Thank you for letting me know. I really appreciate that. I would edit the post and, put a little asterisk with a little heart emoji and say, thanks again. This was really about at the bottom of every post, we put no more, comment below, or let us know below. That was not necessarily a tactic to, tweaking the algorithm, but more so something to say, we're not the experts. We collectively as a community are. So let's hear what you've got. We don't know it all. We want to know what you have to say. And I think that, there's always kind of a level of positivity that we look at things with. So there was a consistency to posting content, consistency to the type of content, obviously within a specific aesthetic that is under the guise of the Wes Anderson aesthetic, so to speak, but then also the consistency with the tone of voice and the consistency with which we communicate with our community and kind of put our arm around them, bring them into the fold, bring them into the conversation, treating that as a conversation instead of a one-way communication. And I feel like that was with the overarching kind of positivity and smile that we were having as we saw this community grow was really key to its growth in and of itself.
I'm on your page right now, kind of looking at it. So you break down the location where it is. You give some information on the location that maybe people aren't aware of, and then you have the photographer. Correct? I mean, you give a shout out to the photographer. Everyone feels
always
like this. How many submissions do you get in, let's say, per week?
It depends on the week, but upwards of anywhere from 200 to 500 a week.
Oh my God.
Through our website. And you touched on a really important part. The recognition, the credit that we provide to the photographer. And again, thanks for kind of noting that. For anybody who hasn't checked, has not kind of come across our page before, we post a location that looks like it may have been plucked from a Wes Anderson film, but it has a real story behind it. It just has an interesting aesthetic, and we tell that story. We start with what it is, where it is, and when it was built or established or founded. And then we go into 150 word or so kind of snapshot of the life of this place or the life of somebody who had a significant impact on this place or from this place. And we, of course, have some hashtags in there, but also it's always about credit. We have now we have writers who work with us, and we provide credit to them, to the photographer, as well as to whatever our sources are. Our whole thing is we're not the experts. The credit is given where the credit is due. And, there's so many amazing photographers that share their works with us. And this is their art. This is their work, right? 90% of them photos are captured with an iPhone or, whatever phone they're using. We do have some professional photographers that have come into the fold and become part of this community in a real way. But the cool part is that it's open to anybody. It's incredibly accessible. You don't have to be a professional photographer. And I'm going back to your previous question. I think that was another interesting part to people, why they kind of joined, because I didn't know that little bit of information. And I have a picture from that place too. That's really cool. And they would submit it and they'd share it with us. And, we might get 200 to 500 plus a week submissions through the website. We're a very small team. It's, there's 3 or 4 of us at this point. And, but Amanda and I look at every submission and we answer every submission with a non-automated response. I think that kind of phases out at a certain scale, but we try to keep up with that as much as possible, because I think that connection provides that feeling of being part of a community. And we, sincerely appreciate the amount of time and effort that people go into with the descriptions that they provide for the photos. And, there's a real heartfelt love for this community that we try to give back to them as much as they're giving to us.
Oh, that's wonderful. Just a quick room reset, folks. Today, you're a part of the Continent Book Tour on Startup Club, and our guest is Wally Koval from Accidentally Wes Anderson, who took his Instagram account to a New York Times bestseller and lots of other things that we're going to talk about in a little bit. The next, we're going to do Q&A starting in about 10 minutes. So if you have a question, now will be the time to raise your hand, and then Ann can get you in the queue and we can do the Q&A in a little bit. But I want to talk about platform, Wally. In the Continent model, platform is always key when the content creator, focuses on being great at one platform and not on multiple at the same time. I think you've really taken that to heart. Can you talk about how you've really focused on Instagram as the home and you haven't been seduced by going off on a whole bunch of other platforms and distracting yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not going to lie and say that it's not been tempting to start kicking off. And that's something that we've been kicking around. But I think that it's really important, especially from a starting point, to pick a platform and just put all your effort into that one space. There is enough, as long as there's enough members of a community out there to create your own, kind of carve out your own niche. I mean, becoming kind of part of that platform, understanding the ins and outs of it, getting comfortable with it. That I think that's super important. And I think that when we go back to when there was an influx, when initially we had a Vogue article written about us right at the start of the community about 6 months after we started it, and there was an influx, we went from 1,500 to 15,000 people overnight. And I think that the people, the analogy that I use is that we kind of set the table, right? We set the table for the dinner party, for the conversation. And when people popped their head in, when 15,000 guests came to the door and they peeked in, they said, oh, okay, I get it. You're telling places what they are, where they are, when they were, and they're telling stories about, okay, and people are, okay, cool. This is great. I'm in. I'll stick around. If I still see these on a regular basis. It'll pop up on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever. I'm starting a blog and I've written this thing and I'm really excited. Follow along. I don't follow along. No offense to anybody or any of my friends. I'll follow along after the 30th or 50th post when I know you're into it. And I think that, from the very beginning, other than Amanda, my wife, who was, telling me why are you talking to 20 people online? Just come to dinner or whatever. I didn't tell anybody about this in my own personal circle, and I kind of just built it off on my own. And that wasn't because I was trying to hide it, but I wanted to make sure that I had gotten it down packed, that I was comfortable, standing up in a room of X number of people and saying, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. And, we're evolving along with this community and just getting comfy with it without any eyes on it necessarily that I don't know, that I brought in. I love my mom and all of the comments that she makes on our posts, but that they would be there whether or not the content was amazing, right? So I leave it up to the greater audience that we culled through aiming directly at one platform. Again, it was a miss. I stumbled onto Instagram and I utilized this platform because it was comfortable to me initially. It could have been Twitter, it could have been Pinterest, it could have been any photo and text-based platform. But Instagram felt comfortable to me. I felt I already had a good grasp of it, and so I, as this was a personal project to begin with, started there.
No, I think that's fascinating. I mean, we talk about how you grit and patience and consistency make all the difference. I mean, but generally we see 9 to 12 months, and I think that was your timetable as well before you really, really see things work. Um, when did you know, besides the Vogue article, that you knew you had something here, that you were saying, "There's a future here. This could be a thing." What are some aha moments that you had?
Some aha moments were actually much smaller than the Vogue article, rather. Some aha moments were the first DMs that we were receiving with photos of people saying, "Ooh, I've been there too. Have you seen this place?" Or if you were you there, you should check out this cafe or whatever. That was a huge aha moment because these are complete strangers from, around the world who have happened upon our, page from a couple hashtags, let's say, and are immediately interested. Not just have they followed along, but now they're sharing their own content. I think that the process of providing your own piece of content through the platform is a big kind of connection point, and that was a huge aha moment for us. The other one was when we launched our, obviously, yes, the book and all of these things, but one of the other things that we started recently was a newsletter. This is, we've been doing this since, I guess, January of 2020, and it's bi-weekly, once every 2 weeks, and it's, we put it out to the community. And you don't necessarily, people could just be following along because they're following along. They could just be like, these are pretty pictures, these brighten my day, that's fine. I don't want anything else in it. And that's totally cool. But when we had 20, 30, 50,000 people subscribe to the newsletter, and the engagement rate, the opens, the clicks, all that stuff, those are great metrics to have. But that proves to me that we're providing valuable insight and information to the community. That was a huge aha moment. That first influx of 20 or 30,000 people that came on to a newsletter was, wow, I expected, I don't know, a couple hundred people, it was kind of the aha moments were all really the first. And I guess this is kind of like an AWA therapy session, because I've not really thought about this, but the first time we posed a question to the community, the first time we went on an adventure with the community to Buenos Aires and had hundreds of suggestions. These were all aha moments in that we were trying something new. I was biting all of my fingernails off before I pushed send or go or post or whatever, because this was stepping outside of the comfort zone. And thankfully, I'm knocking on wood, and I hope everyone else will too. Those aha moments and those firsts continued to be positives. They weren't all, knock it out of the park experiences by any means, but I think it was stepping outside of the comfort zone and trying something that felt right, listening to the gut, because you're so embedded in the community that this feels right. Yes, getting getting some feedback from, as we call them, super adventurers, people who have been around from the beginning and are super into what we're doing, getting some of their feedback, but really kind of just putting yourself out there and going for something new. Each of those experiences was an aha moment. And, I think we've learned a lot from each of them.
No, thank you. But I got one more question, Wally, before we get to Q&A. So now would be
Sure.
the time. Raise your hands if you've got questions for Wally. We'd love to take them. We got about a half hour to do that. You're listening to Wally Koval from Accidentally Wes Anderson. If you would, share this on Twitter so we can, if you think that this would be interesting to some of your friends or colleagues. I want to, but this is kind of an overarching question, but it's important because you've been a content entrepreneur for 4 years now. What's the worst advice you've heard people give content entrepreneurs like yourself when you're starting something? Is there a few things out there that you're like, oh, that's just terrible advice that you're hearing? Like, please don't do that.
I think the number one thing that I touched on it already. The number one thing that I felt was that you should share this out immediately and get all of your friends on board to, help you start this thing. That was terrible advice for me because I wanted to make sure that I could do it on my own. I also think that, it's difficult because there's a fine line between following advice and following someone else's lead. I think that there's so many people who have been successful with as content entrepreneurs that have gone out and made something for themselves. And I think that one of the things that I inadvertently avoided doing, but I feel I had tried multiple times in the past and failed, was following too closely in someone else's footsteps who had been successful in whatever it was. I think that there's a playbook that people make as they kind of create their own path. There are certain mission statements, trust your gut, don't build on rented land, which I'm a huge, I obviously did that. But there are so many things that you can follow these rules of content marketing and help kind of guide your path. But I think that once I received advice from people who had been very successful and I went against it. And it ultimately was a positive for me. I just, it was small things of, why don't you try this? Nah, no, that doesn't feel right because I know the community, what you're trying to build. And there are certain goalposts that you need to hit that can help you kind of down the field, so to speak. And I'm going to mess up my analogy here. There's no analogy really, but it's following down through that sight line, but kind of staying true to the mission that you have in your heart, right? When it comes to working with partners, when it comes to working with others who feel that they may have an impact on the type of content that you're going to put out or the messaging, holding strong to that, God, turning money down. I mean, there were so many things that were such difficult decisions and still are today. But I think that following too closely in anybody else's footsteps, you need to kind of forge your own path in a way in terms of whether it's the niche, whether it's the way that you discuss things with your community, whether it's the tone you take, whether it's the content you're producing as a whole. I think that kind of having your own unique twist on it is what makes it your own and is what, a copycat of sorts is never going to flourish at the same level as someone else who had done it before. So I think that answers your question.
No, it does. No, before I pass it off to Ann, you mentioned something that I want to hit on because it's important. You talked about building on rented land, which a lot of people do. YouTubers, Twitch channels, you did on Instagram, but you're moving that to your e-newsletter where you have more control over. And I think you should talk about that a little bit because that's where a lot of people get lost, where if you build on Instagram, you're building Instagram's subscribers and you don't ultimately have control over that, but you're moving that audience in a lot of ways. You're diversifying into your email newsletter. I mean, that's a pretty big decision.
Totally. Yeah. Look, we have treated the newsletter and we've recently released a new, more comprehensive version of our website, which has, comprehensive breakdowns of all of our adventures and travel guides. And, we call it our searchable adventurers database. We have purposefully only put it out to the community a handful of times because it obviously, with the algorithm, it doesn't reach everyone and not everybody's going to be a first adopter. What we did was for both the website and the newsletter, we put it out there because we wanted the super adventurers. We wanted the people who saw it once and said, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm on board. Bring me along. And what we did was exactly what we did from the very beginning. Instead of telling all of our friends multiple times, follow along, we're now in new territory. We have a newsletter. Why do we do it once every 2 weeks? Well, because we have the capacity to do it in that way at a high level, which is what we aim to do. But also because we want to learn. We want to make sure we want to evolve, just like the community on Instagram has evolved over the past 3-4 years. We want this to evolve just the same. I don't think that it's not a copy paste. It's not like the early days of print where you just put your print, your magazine up online as a PDF, right? I don't want to do that. I want to create something that is a little different, a little more interesting, and I'm utilizing the community and their feedback and the conversation that we're having and answering every reply to every, bulletin that we send out, because it's impactful to the content we're creating, and learning this new path that has kind of deviated from the building on rented land. We're learning how this one works, how this mechanism works. How do we interact with our community? How do we capture this information? How do we do all of the things that we can do with our eyes closed on Instagram? But how does that translate to this new medium? And I think that, if I could go back in time and I knew what was going to happen, I probably would have started this part a lot earlier, because obviously you want to control your messaging to the community. Why go from that? Why go from Instagram to email? Well, now there is no algorithm. It's really whether or not I have provided you with awesome content, whether or not you're going to open that email again. It's all up to me. It's all up to me whether or not you open the next one, if I can wow you this time, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I think your timing was just fine on that, actually. I know you're not asking me.
No, I'm always asking you, Joe. Come on.
But no, I think your timing was pretty good. Okay, I want to make sure we get some questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll get to it. And I know you had a question for Wally, so why don't you go first?
Yes, I'm happy to have it, to get a chance to ask Wally a question today, or maybe a couple. So my first question, you have been it seems like you've been very deliberate in deciding partnerships and kind of the business dealings, right? Of bringing in businesses and working with businesses and partnerships. So can you talk a little bit about how you approach that? Because money is attractive when you get it. I'm curious of how you do it, besides that's good money or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's such a tough one. Look, when I was doing this, I moved this to full-time as of January 2020, which is a great time to start your own business, right? Before this, it was very easy to say no. Amanda and I both had full-time jobs, and we made a decision early on that whatever we're going to put out to the community comes first. The content we're creating is for them, right? That's what it's all about. And we turned money away, and we both kind of looked at each other pre taking this on full time, and we said, "Oh, that's a bummer, but oh well, community's happy, we're pumped." And we held that to a high standard. Now, moving into full time, that changes things. But I think that there is a re-education process that we go through when we have conversations with partners. We say, on our media kit, the first thing is, please don't call us an influencer, because we're not. You could say content creator, you could say whatever you want. I don't know what exactly it is, but it's a longer conversation than a one-word answer as to who we are and what we're trying to create. But choosing those partners, we say no probably 9 times before we say yes, and that's not an exaggeration. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of making sure that, the way that I continue with the analogy of the dinner party. What we want to create is we have certain organizations that we find attractive, many of which don't have money, but are interesting to the community. And that's who we go after. And we want to partner with them because we see them as an extension of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to create. So the conversations that we have with our partners are very transparent in terms of what we will and what we won't do. We've definitely had some, to Joe's aha moments in a negative, more of an uh-oh moment, going down a path with a partner, and ultimately it turns sour. So we've definitely learned a lot along the path, but ultimately, working with partners that understand your community, your audience, but also understanding that they need to trust us if we're going to communicate their messaging, our messaging together, the partner and us, to the community. Because we've been having this conversation with the community, and if we come in and say it in a different way, they're going to look at us like, what? It's not going to resonate. It's not going to sink in. It's not going to make sense, and it's going to feel foreign. It's going to feel inorganic and unauthentic, and it's going to be dismissed. So if, there's always, the quantitative check the box for the KPI, and we need certain number of impressions and this and that. But our aim and our beginning conversation is we get to all of those quantitative things rather, through the qualitative. We go for quality, and that quality begets the quantity that you need in terms of the KPIs. But it's a very interesting conversation from the very beginning with any and all partners. But luckily, we've found some very good ones.
That's great. I think the key point, what you're talking about, is trust. Keeping the trust with the brand and having them trust you is a very interesting approach, because you're right. That's where the audience goes. They have to be able to trust you. And if it's like the problems that Scott Disick had, or the Kardashians of cutting and pasting their comments from that, and you certainly have gone far beyond that, but your audience, you don't want to become the news from that. So
Absolutely.
Great. Well, we have a question from Pam.
Hi, Wally.
Oh, hello, Pam.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. How about you?
I'm excellent as always. Thank you. I have a sort of related question to being a content entrepreneur, but I'm experiencing a lot of people who are having trouble finding really good talent. And, I know your team is still small, but I wonder how you've gone about finding the people to help on your team that you trust and that understand your mission and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is incredible. We're no different than everyone else you're talking to. I think that finding solid talent is incredibly difficult, because especially with what we're trying to do, and especially when you're a content creator, you want, there's a certain tone that we have and a certain type of content that we put out into the world. And there's I can go through all of the pieces that we try to touch on in every piece of content we put out there. But, there's a sense of humor. There's a historic aspect. There's telling an interesting story in this specific way. Finding someone who can do all of those things, you want everyone to have their own voice, but you want it to kind of be within the same tone of the conversation that you've, seated at the dinner table. And finding those individuals has been very difficult because, you start with word of mouth, and you start with those that are close, whether it's industry or friend relations, and bring them into the fold and kind of bring them down that pathway. And I think that that's one of the places where we are really starting to hone more, because we have one other member of our team that is quote unquote full-time, that works with us 7 days a week at this point, but there's a total of 4 or 5 of us that are part of this. And then from a freelance perspective, we will grow from content creators and videographers and editors. We can grow up to 30 or 40 depending on the project. But that core is like the 4 or 5. Bringing people into that core is an incredibly difficult thing to do. However, what we've started to do and what we've started to see is having someone come on board as a part-timer, freelancer. A lot of people we're very lucky in that people are interested and send us their writing and send us their photos and want to be part of the team. And we've set up mechanisms in place where we can test out your writing and see if you're into it, and see if there's a good vibe and a good connection with us and the team and with what you've created, and what the community might want to consume. But unfortunately, it is a very time-consuming process. And with Dexter, our small dog, as head of HR, based on the amount of people that are on the team, it's a tough one to dedicate the amount of time necessary that it truly dictates, right? I mean, to bring a new person onto the team, that's part of the family, especially when it's something this small, as you know very well, and finding people with the right talent, with the right just finding the right people can be a really big enigma, and kind of going down that path is a tough one.
I call it the right energy. I don't know if that's your word or not, but that's the word I like to use, is finding the
Yes,
people with the right
absolutely. I
energy.
love that.
So,
Yeah.
well, thank you very
absolutely.
much. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks, Pam, for your question. And if anyone else in the audience has a question, please just tap the bottom right hand, and we will pull you to the stage. But I'm curious, Wally, you talk about setting the table and your dining table from that. It's gotten huge. So your intimate dinner party that you started has become a banquet center from that in your audience to come through. And I'm curious, because this is such a personal thing, and your not just for you, but for your community, and feeling that, how, maybe talk me through the early days of your interaction with the community, and kind of how, as it's grown 4 years later and it's a full-time business, and how all that works together, of how it's evolved.
Sure. Yeah, it's evolved significantly from the very beginning. Whether that was making sure that anything and any comments, any DMs, all of that was clear. Having, and engaging in real conversation, in Instagram DMs and comments, etc. It has grown significantly to the point where we are trying to understand how we can continue to have that. We're evolving, we're adjusting, we've evolved from the very beginning, and it's not feasible to answer every DM. It's just not, which is why we have kind of created these channels to funnel some of that content in. We are not yet, we've started toying with the kind of automated message from a DM perspective. We've tried toying with an automated message on email for certain things that ultimately kind of point you in the right direction, meaning, you can submit your photo here, kind of the FAQ right off the bat, because although we preach it again, not everybody sees the messaging, and that's okay. So we want to make sure that there's still a mechanism for them to be involved and be pumped about their level of involvement. I think that Amanda and I try really hard to make sure that whatever the interactions we are, although we can't get to every DM, we answer every email, we read every submission and look at every submission. But we just want to make sure that every interaction, whether that's from a member of our team reaching out to someone for customer service, or they haven't received their print order, or their book didn't make it in time, or somebody messaging us and saying your book showed up and it's broken, and I say, but you didn't order it from us, you ordered it from Amazon, but I'm happy to facilitate. It's kind of that, not that Zappos approach where it's like, we'll order you a pizza or stay on the phone or whatever that story is, but it's really just taking a human approach and treating each interaction as if you would with a friend, so to speak, and not a customer, quote unquote, or not, that transactional relationship. What we try to experience and what we try to create, whether that's online, whether that's on Instagram, email, whether that's in one of our pop-ups. I mean, even through COVID, we've done multiple pop-up, quote unquote, IRL experiences, both in New York and London. And, we obviously weren't able to go to London, but the people that we had over there were very much, as Pam put it, they very much had that same energy. And I think as long as the communication that you have maintains that tone, maintains that energy, and maintains kind of that authentic feeling to what you are always putting out to the community otherwise, I think that's the key. That's what you want to maintain, is that tone and that energy. And ultimately that, I always put it that, you can tell when you're talking to someone on the other side of the phone, whether you're smiling or not. And I think that although it goes through email, there is a feeling that you have when you're writing that email. And if you're peeved and you're not having a good day, I think it comes through. I think there is an energy. There's something about that. So maintaining that level of positivity is as difficult as that might be through all communications with the community. I think it brushes off. I think it comes across, and I think it kind of leaves them with a more positive experience all around.
Yeah, I like that. Sometimes you take a breath before the positivity, but it's a good approach from that. So we have a question now from, I hope I pronounce it right, Mamad. Well, or not. We have another question coming up in a moment, so we were bringing Lindsay to the stage.
I hope it wasn't something I said, Mamad.
It was probably my mispronunciation from that, but I think I've got Lindsay right. So Lindsay, go ahead.
Hi, this was such a nice surprise. I have been following Wally. I've been following Accidentally Wes Anderson for long enough. I can't.
I love to hear it.
Yeah, and I think I found you through Whalebone.
Yes, Whalebone is a print partner of ours. They just to give everybody, they're a print magazine. 6 times a year they come out and they put out a really awesome print publication themed, and they are one of the extensions of our brand, meaning we met them, they had the right energy, and their community and everything about them has been just on point. So we have had a feature in every one of their magazines starting from last February and moving into through today. So yeah, if you found us through Whalebone, then Lindsay is good peeps automatically.
Well, what a great match. I love that you're being so intentional and just, you're taking an approach that you don't see on Instagram or on social media these days. And yeah, you have me as a follower, and I just wanted to get up here and say thanks. I love what you're putting out there. I want the book. And and I also, of course, I love Wes Anderson, but so I'll think of a question while I'm up here, but I just wanted to come up and give you some love and just thank you, the moderators, for arranging this room today.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wally.
Oh,
I was going to say that's we wanted to bring you up here, Lindsay, because Wally's ego just isn't quite big enough. So I'm glad you were able to join us up here. So no, we appreciate it, Lindsay. It's amazing how we find. Go ahead, Wally. Jeff.
Yeah. To that point, though, to what Lindsay, the fact that she came from Whalebone. So just as I mentioned, they are a print publication. They're based out of Montauk, New York. I did not know them. I had never heard of them. I knew nothing of them. And I think back in 2018, their president, they're a small team also, bigger than us, 20 or so people, but they've been around for about 5-6 years, and they reached out to us and just said, hey, I like what you're doing. They have a space down in the West Village, and we started going to have drinks with Eddie and whatever members of the team were there, me, Amanda, and our business partner, David. And we just kept sitting around every Friday night and saying, I don't know what it is, but there's a great feeling here. What can we do together? And it was through maybe 5 or 6 or 7 of those conversations that ultimately he said, we're doing this travel issue, and you guys, there's something here. We had just gotten back from Tokyo, where we were there with a partner of ours, and we had awesome stuff that we really wanted to keep kind of putting out into the world about this trip, because it was just so incredible. And so we had our first feature in the travel issue that, was an 8-10 page feature that kind of pulled along and brought introduced the Whalebone audience to AWA and these adventures. The Whalebone audience, as Lindsay is now attesting to, whether she liked it or not, she has, they were into what we had put out there. And it was just this kind of culmination of this, going back to Pam, the energy that we had put out there and the conversations we had. It wasn't just, hey, we have a magazine and we want to put you in it. Those are great too, and we've done those. But this was that, whether it's, bringing quote unquote talent into the pool, it was kind of this combination of really great people finding each other somehow and creating awesome things. And the pop-ups that we've done have all been out of their space in the West Village. And, they've been great partners to us. And just, to what Lindsay put out there, it's awesome to see the crossover, because to what Anne was asking about the partners portion, they're not a partner in that sense. They're just kind of a friend partner. And we just are happy to talk about them. And I feel like there's something to be said for that excitement that you have for working with a partner, talking about a partner. When you feel that excitement, that comes through to the audience. And so many members of our community have become subscribers to Whalebone Magazine, not because we said, go subscribe, subscribe, blah, blah, but because we talked about it with this excitement, and we shared all of this kind of interesting stuff that they were doing. We shared the value that they were bringing to us, and through us sharing that value, they saw it and they kind of came on board too. So I'm really glad Lindsay stepped up on the stage.
Actually, I'd like to say that mesh between you guys, it just seemed so perfect that I always just assumed that AWA was someone from the Whalebone team that had just take photos and just started their own thing. Yes, I thought you guys were the same. I thought you were probably worked with Whalebone and then you just started. Yeah, because you're a photographer.
I loved it.
Yeah, I really thought.
I'm going to let them know. Let them know.
It's funny how the stories evolve and you can learn together of the surprise things in the room. So as we wrap up, we'll take our last question, and I think it's Karine. Karine, did you have a question?
Oh, try. Mute is in the lower right-hand corner. Karine, remove yourself from mute.
I had a bad time with that too.
Sorry. I'm not a big user. Sorry. Yeah, very quickly. Thank you so much for being here. It was very interesting to hear. Quick question: did you ever have an offer to buy your business? And if yes, did you ever think about it? And who could do such a thing?
Yes, we have, and no, we did not. Look, just like I think that it would have to be the right partner. I think that there's what we have created with this community. Above all is trust, like Anne mentioned before. There's a trust and a respect, and you could make a quick cash grab if you want, and disappoint 1 million people or whatever number of people are part of the community. But that's not in our DNA. That's not who we're about. And turning down money and turning down offers is a difficult thing when you think about it at face value. But I think that to what Lindsay came up here and said before about how we worked with Whalebone, and she had no idea, and she just thought that this was an extension of their brand, and just as it was an extension of ours. That's the type of partnership that's the only way that a takeover would work in my mind, right? Or a buyout, or whatever you want to call it. It would have to be a continuation of what we've created in the same tone and in the same manner with which we've created this conversation and this ongoing community with them.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Of course. Absolutely.
Karine, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, we are at the top of the hour. I guess real quick, Wally, I want to get one last question. What one thing should someone do who wants to become a successful content entrepreneur like yourself do this week? Is there one thing that you say, do this, focus on
absolutely. I think that, it's always funny I have multiple Instagram accounts, and most of them are Finsta, quote unquote, right? Nobody knows what they are. And it's for me to try out things, right? Whether it's posting something to figure out what does a reel look like. And this is just me talking about Instagram, right? So if you're on Facebook or you're on, pick your platform, it doesn't matter. Whether it's on your own account or whether it's on one that maybe no one else follows and it's just a trial, go try something. I didn't know what it would look like. I was very scared to try to post a reel on an account that, on our account after so long. But after posting it, I found a lot of value in it. But I wanted to learn kind of in the privacy of my own home. This is the first time I'm on Clubhouse, right? I try something new, step out of your comfort zone. And whether that is something as small as posting some different type of content or longer form content or something you've been thinking about that you're like, I think my community might dig this, but I'm not sure. I don't know what that thing is, but just try that thing. Try that thing on your main account or on a private account, and just give it a try so that you see it, so you feel more comfortable with it. Because all of those aha moments that we've had, it's just come from trusting our gut and then kind of stepping out there and crossing our fingers.
Go break some things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly right. All right, Wally, my friend, thank you so much. Before we close this out, where's the best place people can get more information about you and the book?
Oh, accidentallywesAnderson.com.
Okay, it's just Joe again. I hope you enjoyed this amazing interview with Wally Koval. A couple things I learned. First, the end is very important, where Wally experiments on Instagram and other accounts to see what works. The best way to learn what works is to actually try it and not just hypothesize about it. Also, his focus on audience is unparalleled. Wally doesn't make one decision unless he believes the move will help the audience in some way. He's turned down quite a bit of revenue opportunities because of this, which I believe will only help him in the long term. Thanks again to Wally Koval for the wonderful interview, and join us next Thursday on the Content Inc. podcast for another very special interview and case study from the Content Inc. book. Good luck, and go out and change the world for the better.